Hey y'all, so you notice we're doing things a little bit different this time. If you've watched my other Unicorno videos, I'm starting with the acetone, which I wish I hadn't. So when I sat down to film or start customizing this thing, I thought, why film the beginning when I'm ripping off the head? It's pretty much the same as all the others, nothing special. This Unicorno is from Series 4. And I've done a lot of these, and all the ones that I've done from Series 4, the pegs had to rip off like I've done in my previous Unicorno videos. But this one didn't. You can see it came clean off the neck peg, which is better. It's a lot easier to reattach the head this way. But for some reason, I start YouTube, I start filming this stuff, and things start changing on me. This head came off different, the Superman head came off different, so yeah, I just need to learn to always film my stuff while I'm doing this. But yeah, so this is, we're going to be transforming this into Rogue from the X-Men. This one was supposed to be before Batman, but that footage got lost, so this is actually all in total, it's the third one that I'm doing. It's the second one I'm filming. The first one went to Ann and Baxter from the Whatnot Spot. If you guys haven't checked out their video, Ann went kind of crazy over it. I'm really glad she liked it. But yeah, I said that I recorded it and that I was going to make a video, and I come through on my promises. So I was planning on making a Rogue anyway, just not this soon, but who cares? So first step after decapitation is removing all the paint with pure acetone. You can use regular fingernail polish remover, but it'll just take you a lot longer. Also, while I'm doing this, Anne was wondering when she was unboxing this what her Unicorno used to be. Hers was Yuki, the snow Unicorno. I start the paint job by putting at least 1 to 2 coats of white down on it. Just to make the other colors pop more, you won't have to use as many coats of the other colored paint as you would otherwise. And when the head's detached like this, there's a small hole on the head, and if you have a small enough tool, you can use it to hold the head up, which makes it a lot easier to paint. I don't know if I show it here in a minute, but yeah, that didn't stay long. If you're going to use a tool, make sure it's something that's small yet strong enough to hold it up. Otherwise, it will fall down. I think I put about 2 coats of white on both the head and the body before I started actually painting the color on. And just because I have no problem showing you guys my mistakes, I decided to add it on. Yeah. By the way, I just now remembered, I was rewatching my Superman custom video, and I said that I don't do scripts on these videos because I wanted to sound more genuine. I realized that kind of could be interpreted as I didn't think that other people who do voiceovers are genuine. You watch people like Delightful or, Doll Motion, you can see their personalities in their videos, in their voiceovers. When I do scripts, I don't know, my mind goes into professional mode, so you guys don't really see my true personality as you do, like when I'm just talking to you guys like this. So I meant genuine for me, I didn't mean genuine, general. I'm using the G sound too many times. So I just wanted to clear that up in case anyone thought I was, calling them out or something. I'm not. It's just my preference. So I start out painting with the pale daffodil, that's what that color is called, for the costume, and I painted all over the body of it except for the tail and the neck. I've told you guys before, if you paint on the neck where the body connects to the head, when you go to glue it back later, you'll be gluing paint on paint instead of the plastic on the plastic. That's not so much a concern when they come off this way, when you can, the peg and the hole are separate. That just depends on how much glue they use, I'm pretty sure, but anyway. It's not that big of a deal when it comes to these ones because they just, they fit back in like a puzzle and it's a lot more secure. But I still go ahead and, neglect painting the neck and the base around the head anyway, just to be safe. but I do put about 2 coats, or actually I think I put 3 coats of this yellow on the body. You know, one of these days I might have to think of trying to find a background that actually looks appealing instead of a ruffled piece of paper and a thing labeled knife. But anyway, so I'm putting down a layer of sun-kissed peach for her flesh tone. I'm covering the face, the ears, and the horn in this color. You probably want to put down at least 2, even though it's all covered in white now and it goes on really smooth, or the color goes on really smooth. You might want to just put a second coat in just to be safe in case you are like me and drop it halfway through the project and it chips. So, yeah. Better safe than sorry. So, when you look up Rogue, like, you know, sometimes you can find those sites that actually have, like, facts listed, like eye color, hair color. When you see the hair color listed for Rogue, some say brown, some say reddish brown, some say red. It's weird. So for me, I mixed up a batch using a very light brown color. I believe it's called chestnut, not sure. And then a darkish red color that's called Barn Red, I believe. Both Apple Barrel brands. And I mixed those together and became a very... It's still mainly brown, but it has a hint of red in it. And I thought it looked pretty good to match Rogue. So that's what I used for the mane and the tail, and I put, I want to say 3 coats on each. So if you flip through a Marvel comic book or look up Marvel characters and you see a girl with a white streak through her hair, it's probably Rogue. It's a very iconic part of her character, and I wanted to make the white blend in with the brown and not just look like it's, you know, just a blunt layer across it. So instead of like drawing, you know, like a line or anything, I took a thin paintbrush, a rather small one, and I made the tip of the mane, you can see, pretty opaque, but when it got, you know, past the horn, I started, well, actually I did it all the time just to get my hand used to that movement. But I started doing those little flicks. That way, it's not just a blunt line across it. It looks more like it's fading into it, and it makes it look a lot more natural. I repeated the same motion on the tail, and for the base of them, I did go back in and dab on a little white that, you know, had a few sparse spots in it. You just want to make sure not to get the tips where you're flicking the brush opaque. That way it looks more like it's blending in with the rest of the color. Now this part is totally optional depending on how shaky your hand is. I got this really thin nail tape on Amazon, and I pretty much just do my best. It's nail tape, so it's not that sticky. Put it down the middle of her costume, and I made more like a V shape towards the neck on the front of her costume. Just to make it more of a blunt line later on. The outer parts of her costume are painted green, the inner parts are yellow, so that's why I put that line down there. It doesn't have to be totally secure or anything, you just want to get it on there so you'll have a pretty good guide to follow. And you can see here I'm tearing off another little tiny strip to make that V on the costume. You just want to make sure it's on there enough that it's not going to move around too much, but also make sure it's loose enough that you can find a place to easily pull it off afterwards. And I put one down the middle of her back as well. Sorry. I should have brought another bottle of water in here. Once the tape is down, I go in with a toothpick and start painting the 2 little lines on her boots. Rogue's boots in the classic X-Men, she has these 2 lines on the top and bottom of her kneecaps on her boots. So I'm trying to mimic that a little bit with these. Obviously it's not the same shape as her boots, but it will give the effect. And if you're doing this exactly like me, you might want to do this before you put the tape down. Just so you're not moving the tape. I didn't have a problem with it, but once I started doing it, I realized I need to be a little bit more careful. And when you're doing thin spots like this, a toothpick is best, or a very, very, very small tipped dotting tool, one or the other. Once the lines on both the kneecaps are drawn or pretend kneecaps in this case, you guys know what I mean. Once you have those lines drawn, you can start going in with the rest of the outfit. So I painted the sides of her outfit, the outer part of her wings, and most of her front hooves this color. Rogue has a jacket, and when the sleeves of her jacket end, you can see a bit of the green costume before her yellow sleeves. So I put just about 3/4 of the front hooves I painted in that green color. And I just followed the line of the tape pretty much. It was here that I realized the back tape wasn't really all that necessary. I pretty much just follow the line of the wing, if that makes any sense. I go from where the wing is towards the back and just make a straight line as possible from there. So in other words, where the wing ends, I just try and make a line from there to the back of the body. And I put this green on about 3 coats, I want to say. I took off the tape after the first one, just to make sure that it doesn't peel off the tape later once it's dried. But once you have those solid lines on there, it is pretty easy to follow. And if you do mess up a little bit, it's really easy to go back in and, with the yellow and clean it up. So I showed y'all this technique when I was doing my Superman custom. Again, for anyone who's new to this, that's not medicine, it's glue. It's Mod Podge, matte varnish mixed with water. You have to mix it with water to actually get at least semi matte finish. And the reason I put a coat of this on the face, I don't know why I'm putting it on the ear, but why I put it on the face is a lot of times I mess up when it comes to the eyes, and I have to wash off the black paint in order to reshape it. And that can smear on the paint on the bottom, especially if it's already dried. So putting a layer of this stuff on there first helps protect the flesh tone paint that you've already put on there. It doesn't protect it completely. There is still going to be a bit more smearing, but it's a lot easier to clean up. I don't know if you guys can tell, but if you do see a change in the lighting, I apologize. Sometimes the light on my phone decides it wants to quit as soon as I turn it on, and I don't really notice. But anyway, so I grab my smallest brush, which is my angled brush, and I start painting a rather small circle on one side of the head and grow outwards until I think it's a decent shape. And then I do my best to mimic it on the other side. One positive thing about maybe scripting this stuff is I wouldn't have to stumble over my words as much, but then again, I'm me, so yeah, it probably wouldn't help that much. Anyway, so here I am trying to mimic it on the other side. You really want to flip it around as much as possible to make sure you're getting it as symmetrical as possible. Unless you are very meticulous when it comes to this. I can say the word meticulous, but I can't say mimic. I'm weird. Unless you're really meticulous and paying attention, chances are you're not going to get this symmetrical, at least not completely. So try not to stress over it. It's fine. No one is going to be looking all that closely unless you really goof it up. So just do your best and have fun with it. It doesn't need to be perfect at all. Trust me, none of mine are perfect. I know that it is tragically off screen, guys, and I'm sorry about that. But you can see, there we go. I put a dot of black paint on there accidentally, it just sort of flung. But you can see me scrubbing it with that plastic brush. If you do make a mistake, especially if it's something that you don't notice until it's partially dry or completely dry, you want to use these brushes with the plastic bristles. They're cheap, they're kind of useless when it comes to painting, but when it comes to smearing glue or scrubbing, those plastic bristles are a lot more helpful than a regular soft bristle brushes. I think I mentioned this in my Superman video, but evidently eyelashes are the key element in toy making when you are distinguishing male from female for some weird reason. it's weird. It's like they don't think boys have eyelashes, but whatever. So if you want to follow that trend and put the eyelashes on the girls, go ahead. I do it just because I think it looks a little bit prettier. However, they are a pain to make. You want to get the smallest brush that you can with a pointed edge. My angled brush doesn't really work for it because it's not as pointy as this brush that I'm using now. But you do want to be careful and make it as symmetrical as possible, and that's the part that always kicks you in the butt. After the eyelashes come the white part of the eyes. And this one I am using my angled brush just because, again, it's a small, but it's a little bit wider, so it works perfectly for an area where you're trying to cover it a little bit better. A small area that you're trying to cover a little bit better. Now, in my Superman video, I mentioned that you guys need to make the part of the eye that's closer to the ear opaque. It doesn't really matter on the part towards the ends of the end of the nose. And I forgot to mention that that's only true when you're working with dark color irises. You know, Superman's was dark blue, so it covered up pretty well, but if you're using a lighter color iris, like a light blue or a light green, then you might want to make it all completely opaque. For Rogue, her eyes are usually a green color. I don't know whether it's really, dark green or light green, honestly. It honestly depends on who's coloring the comic book. That's what it depends on. But for this one, I decided to make it a darker green just so it wouldn't be the exact same color as her outfit. And yes, before anyone mentions it, I am aware of the lack of consistency in this video. I'm trying to group it together better. I just paint them as I go along, switching from the body to the head, but I'm trying to make it more cohesive and showing you guys like one part back to back. That's why you can see the body that's a little bit further along than the video is right now. But anyway, with my angled brush, which is again a small, rather thin, still kind of wide brush, I paint on the pupil. Usually it only takes one coat for something this small. And this is when you want to go over the entire eye and see if there's any spots of the color that is a little bit wobbly, where it connects to the outside black ring. And if you guys hear a mower outside, I'm sorry, I'm sitting next to a window. Anyway, if you do see that, the black line isn't as prominent as you want it to be, just go around with a toothpick and clean it up. It's very easy. This is always the most satisfying part to me because it's just so simple. It's just a little white dot, so easy to do. You just use a dotting tool or the end of a toothbrush, it doesn't matter, to make a small dot between the iris and the pupil, just to make that highlight and give more life to the figure's eyes. And now it's time to put on Rogue's iconic leather jacket. Now I've seen some images that have shown it kind of like an olive green kind of color, more like a cloth jacket. But the one I remember, it was brown, almost like a leather jacket. So I'm interpreting it as a leather jacket. And if you're doing anything that's leathery, my suggestion would be to use fabric paint. Fabric paint sticks to this stuff just as well as acrylic paint does. It just makes it a lot more 3D. So it just gives you that textural element that will make the piece pop. And it doesn't lay down flat and it just blends in with the rest of the paint. If you're working on a figure this small, I do recommend getting a brand of paint that has that little nozzle on the end of it, just so you can more easily control where it is. Although I will say that if you're doing something this small, you can apply it with a paintbrush rather easily as well. It's just easier with the nozzle. Excuse me. And you need to use the toothpick to straighten up some of the lines, because even with that little nozzle, sometimes the nozzle is still too big to reach around some of the places. And also, really check after that dries. Usually it takes about 4 hours for this stuff to dry. That's how long it recommends on the package anyway. Usually I check after 2, and sometimes it's good, but just depends on how humid your room is that you're working in. But anyway, after it's all dry, you want to go back in and really look around, see if there's anything that needs to be cleaned up. In fact, look at that before it's even dry too, especially around the edges, because if you got something too wobbly, you can use like a cotton swab or something, or even a paintbrush, and just wipe it away really quick and then paint over the smear. It will blend in perfectly. But yeah, check it afterwards, make sure all the spots are covered, and because it's really easy to leave just like a little bitty like needle point space without the paint. And you can also see there me using a paintbrush to spread it around. If you're working on a large surface with this puffy paint or fabric paint, I wouldn't recommend it because it makes it go on a lot thinner. But if you're working on a small space and you're just dabbing it on, a paintbrush works fine. If you do look back after it's all dried and you see that there is a tiny spot that doesn't have coloring on it, or if you got one line a little bit wobbly, you can just lightly go back with a small tool. I'm using this sponge tipped thing. I don't know what it's called. Detailer, I guess you could call it. I don't know. And I just put a little bit of puffy paint on the paper that I'm using and lightly spread it around with that so it's easier to control. And also, if you don't put a huge blob on it like you would have if you just used the nozzle again, then you don't have to make it, put an entire second coat on it to make it even again. I got out another of those sponge tip brushes. You can reuse those, guys, but I only reuse them if I'm using the exact same color. If you're using a different color, I suggest getting another sponge tipped thing out. But it is good for correcting mistakes. I'm going over the wings to where the brown puffy paint got on them. It's just easier than using a paintbrush because it applies a lot of paint, where a paintbrush would just make a thin layer of paint. I tried to zoom in a little bit closer on this one so you guys can see what I'm doing because I'm an idiot and didn't show the camera. Anyway, this version of Rogue has a brown belt that has little pouches all around it. So with a toothpick, I'm going around and creating small squares around her waist, all the way around. And I'm trying to make them as consistent as possible. Usually that doesn't happen. But you do want to try and put the first square you make should be right there in the middle where, her front waist would be in a person form, if that makes any sense whatsoever. Just to make sure it's, in the middle, it's prominent, it's straight as it can be, especially when something's going to go there because that's where one of her X logos are. So you definitely want to put that on there as best as possible. For the other squares, just try to make them, again, the same length, the same width. It's very hard to do on a 3D figure, and, you're going all the way around, so it's really difficult. If you can't do it, don't stress too much. Just try and make it as good as possible. And you can see I'm going around taking my time with each of those squares. And I'm not coloring them in yet. Right now, I'm just working on the edges and trying to make them all as best shaped as possible. Breaking out that sponge tip again, and again, if you guys hear a mower, I am sorry. But you want to be careful when doing something with sharp edges like a square here with those sponge brushes, but if you are careful and just lightly dab it on and take your time, it should be fine. And if you do go out of edge, just go back in with a thin paintbrush and clean it up. It's no big deal. But you do want to take your time with it, try and make it as clean as possible. And usually when you use the sponge, it keeps you from having to do a second coat. Sometimes you still do, but usually if you put it on thick enough, you don't have to have a second coat. And finally, with the belt, not finally for the whole thing, but finally for the belt, I'm taking this pointed brush that I used for the eyelashes, and I'm sorry my hand is in the way, to connect the squares and make the actual belt. For one of Rogue's logos, she has a few on her outfit. It is a black dot on the middle of her costume on her chest, and with a dotting tool, I just make a small black dot and wait for it to dry. She also has these two small black lines on the top of her costume on her chest. I don't know what they are, but they're there, so just draw them on with a toothpick. Another two logos are found on the shoulder blades of her jacket. So really to make them look better, I put them on the space where the leg meets the rest of the body. I could put it towards the neck, closer to where the shoulder would actually be on this figure, but it just looks a little bit weirder, so I just put them there. So just two small red dots on both sleeves. And since the red is already out, just grab a toothpick and put the small little X that's on the front of her belt. That's why you want to make sure that that first square you put down is in the middle, because that's where her logo is. Once the black dot has dried, the X on that part is just the same exact yellow as the rest of her costume. Just drawn through the dot. So with a toothpick, just lightly put that same yellow color on to create an X through that dot. Once the red dots have dried, you can go back in with a toothpick and make two black X's on each one of those dots. If they come out a little bit wonky, with enough patience, and you can just go back and forth with the paint and a steady hand to correct it all. Now what could probably be argued as the most important step, reattaching the head. I use Gorilla Glue for this, the super glue, and I wear gloves just to make sure I don't get the glue on my hands, because they are really tough to get off if you get super glue on your hands. For these pegs, I think I said before, they're so much easier to attach when they come off clean like this. All you have to do is put a little bit of that glue inside, and put the net peg back on, and the best part about this, you don't have to hold it together. They just stay together like a puzzle. I hold it there for a few seconds just to make sure, but you don't really need to hold it together at all. I just do it because I'm a worrywart. See? You don't have to do it, you just have to sit it down and wait for it to dry on its own. 3 coats of sealant later, and you have a completed Rogue Unicorno figure. So thank you guys so much for watching this. I know it was a little bit jumbled. If you guys saw my other Unicorno videos, I got a little bit out of order from what I was originally planning, but whatever, it all got done and they all got finished and they all look pretty good, especially this Rogue. I think out of all the Unicorno videos I've done so far, this one definitely turned out the best of the bunch. I do have another one coming up very soon. It's already completed. I just need to compile the footage and record it, so look forward to that. Thank you guys so much for watching. Please like, share, comment, subscribe, all that good stuff, and I'll see y'all later. Bye.